York City at the top of the hour every weekday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. The Fourth Branch presents discussion, debate, commentaries on social, political issues, current events, sports, entertainment, religion, education, science, and every Saturday at 10:30 a.m. for a full presentation on controversial issues such as war on blacks, are Republicans dumber than Democrats? Information which might irritate you, make you cry, make you laugh, but above all, will make you smarter. Join us every time. It is the right thing to do. It is the only way to keep your sanity in a world of chaos, hypocrisy, immorality, and deception. Welcome to Common Sense. Hello everyone, welcome to the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense. Today is Saturday, May 25th, 2019, and we have a full program presentation which is titled War on Blacks. Which war on blacks? You might ask. In fact, many have. One such person asked, "What the hell are you talking about?" Harry Belafonte said that when we raise our voice, black, in protest against oppression, I'm paraphrasing here, you can read the whole quote on your screen, those who are okay with our oppression are the first to criticize us. A few months ago, we started talking about war on blacks, and we went as far back as slavery to understand the origins of this problem. We got as far as the bridge which represent slavery, at least what links the past into the present. And we have talked a lot about what happened on that bridge, that is before slavery and after slavery. So that bridge we refer to is a symbolic bridge, and something happened on that bridge, and we spent a great deal of time debating it. We spent a great deal of time talking about it. We spent a great deal of time showing the amount of casualties on that bridge. We left that bridge behind, and we were up to the point of talking about what happened beyond slavery. Wouldn't you like to know? Of course. Today, we continue with this series, War on Blacks. And we will try as much as possible, as we have been doing for the Mueller report, to bring it more often into the discussion in order not just to talk about it, as we mentioned already in this program. The purpose is not just to talk about a topic and walk away from it, but rather to propose a solution. But of course, in order to propose a solution, we have to understand the problem. So we will talk about different aspects of the problem. We will bring examples. We will provide proof, evidence, and we will point fingers to those who are responsible for the problem. And as we move along, we will try to identify solution. By no means do we know, or that the solution that we propose are the best solution, but rather an alternative to what currently is, which is none. As such, today we will talk about these very controversial issues. War on blacks. Who are behind the war on blacks? What do they get to gain to wage a war on blacks? And as so many have asked, which war on blacks? And all that we will talk about, of course, not in the span of an hour, but at least we will begin the conversation. I strongly encourage you, if you're watching now or later you're watching this video, to join us every time we have this topic in discussion, because we do not just simply talk about war on blacks. We do not simply say it for the sake of saying it, but as mentioned, we will provide evidence, proof of such, but more importantly, we will try to figure out a solution. The reason the label or the expression war on blacks make you feel cringy is because obviously no one wants to talk about war. That's number one. No one wants to believe that there is indeed a war on blacks. And yet, every single day in the United States of America, the casualties mount on pretty regularly, especially for blacks. That's what happens when there is a war. There are casualties. And as we discussed during the time that we were talking about slavery, the casualties on the black side have been mounting with no end in sight. Today we will take a quick trip back, not as far back as to slavery, but to provide examples which will be used as backdrop, as foundation for us to talk about the problem and hopefully to find a solution. Hopefully in the coming days we will pick up from where we left off on the discussion about slavery. What happens beyond slavery? You are on the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense. Hi, I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program. War on blacks is a topic added to the Fourth Branch programming in order to discuss the intricacies, the complexities of race relation in America. The goal is threefold. 1. To bring attention to the various forms of prejudice, discrimination, and racism in the country. 2. To expose the undeniable presence of such in every aspect of life and every corner of our society. 3. To extricate us all from the ignorance, the indifference, or the complicity. The ultimate objective is to make the discussions of those issues, racism, prejudice, discrimination, a normal part of our lives. Then, and only then, will we as a society be able to eradicate the problem. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Abraham Joshua Heschel exclaimed, "Racism is man's gravest threat to man, the maximum of hatred for the minimum of reason. Join me in the journey to restore equality. Or would you please get out of the way? Thank you. The problem of race relation in America is not a figment of imagination of blacks. It's not a small problem. It's not a problem on the fringe. It's not just a few people. It is a widespread problem in the country. And it predates the current president, who is overtly racist. So no one can bring Donald Trump as being the reason the problem is here. He has certainly exacerbated the problem, no doubt about it. But the problem is rampant. It's everywhere. 1941. 4 black men, actually you're looking at 3 of them. One did not make it by the time this picture was taken. 4 black men, known in history as the Florida Groveland 4, were accused of raping a white woman. Now, this is nothing new as far as black being accused of doing something to white women. You may recall Emmett Till lost his life in the hands of mobs because a white woman accused him of whistling or tapping her on her butt. Now that white woman happened to still be alive and just published a book, which information we will bring you later as we continue the conversation in this topic. Those 4 black teenagers were accused of raping a white woman. That was 1949. Now, the reason this come in the news is because on January 11, 2019, the new governor, Ron DeSantis, issued a pardon for those 4 teenagers accused. $1949. Now keep that in mind as we continue providing you some information about incidents that happened in the past involving blacks. In 1989, five black teenagers were humiliated, convicted for raping a white woman, something that did not happen. Even Donald Trump at that time was so disgusted, so much against blacks, he took full pages of ads asking for the execution of those 5 black teenagers. According to the report, the individual law enforcement detective who was responsible to find who perpetrated the crime, not only the woman was raped, but she was severely beaten. He extracted confession from those teenagers who were already scared that they did something that they shouldn't have, which means they left their home and their parents weren't even aware of the fact they weren't nearby. And the detective told them if they confess, and this is true story, if they confess to the crime, then they will be able to go home. And they did. What do you expect from teenagers who are scared, who are afraid their parents are going to find out they're not at home? So they confess. It so happened, not only did they not commit the crime, they weren't even anywhere near the crime. Keep that in mind as you're watching and listening to this story, to those stories. We just look at the Groveland Park 4 black teenagers who were accused of raping a white woman. A mob of white killed them because, well, they did justice, except for one problem. They were not involved in that rape. New York City, 1989. 5 black teenagers were coerced to make confession of a crime they did not commit. They spent a good part of their lives in jail. And if New York City had death sentences, they would have been long executed for a crime they did not commit. In 1995, Susan Smith, that's the woman you're looking at on your screen, on the left part of your screen, and on the right part, that's her 2 children, Alex and Michael. One is 14 months old, the other one was, one was 14 months old, and the other one was just 3 years old. She drowned them, and she pinned the problem on a black man who kidnapped her children. In 1949, Florida, white woman accused 4 black teenagers of raping her, something that did not happen. In 1989, 5 black teenagers in New York City were sentenced to life in prison for a crime they did not commit. Well, later on, that was rectified a few years ago, you may recall. 1995, Susan Smith accused a black man of taking her 2 children after she drowned them. What you're looking at now is Charles Stewart and his wife Carol, 1989. Charles Stewart shot his pregnant wife make a call to 911, claimed that he had been shot, and describe the individual who killed him. That black man, his name is Willie Bennett, arrested, as you can see, arrested and being processed for committing that heinous crime. He killed a pregnant wife, a pregnant woman, and he fatally shot Charles Stewart, except for one problem: that did not happen. Charles Stewart was the individual who actually killed his wife and shot himself to make it look like something of a homicide, and he blamed that guy for it. At that time, law enforcement ransacked the black community, kicked doors down, looking for Willie Bennett, who just committed a heinous crime. Except that he did not. Now, those examples I gave you, not just for the sake of giving the example, but in order to get to a very important point. 1949, 4 black teenagers lost their lives, literally, in the hands of a mob of white, because they were accused of raping a white woman, except that they did not. 1989, New York City, 5 black teenagers were coerced to confess to raping a white woman and beating her to death because they wanted to go home, except that they never did, for a crime they did not commit. Susan Smith in 1995 accused a black man of kidnapping her 2 children after she drowned them. Again, 1989, Charles Stewart killed his wife and shot himself and accused a black man of doing that. You see the problem here? Society has been structured in such a way to pin everything that's criminal on blacks. And those are the news that stay in the mindset of everyone because blacks are criminals. And as such, every time white individuals do criminal act, they automatically point to blacks and society react accordingly. And the war on blacks we're talking about is not just being waged by the government, by a police officer, it's being waged by civilian, by the society, which find it all too convenient to pin everything that happened that's criminal on blacks. That didn't happen by accident, by the way, because we started to talk about that.
and New York City in particular has been very famous for doing those kind of things. Now those stories, you'll hear about them, you'll read about the detail of those stories as we continue the conversation about war on blacks. But today I want to get to a much more a broader point by showing you that society is overtly racist. The white society, our society has been programmed to be racist naturally towards black. Susan Smith killed her children. She didn't even bat an eye. It's a black man. Charles Stewart killed his wife. He didn't bat an eye. It's a black man. And those are not isolated cases. I use them because, well, I've been using those cases before to make this kind of point. And society is always open to hear that the minute that they say it's a black man, it's a black man. No need to look further. When the 5 black teenagers in New York City were accused of raping that white woman and beating her to death, Donald Trump took 3 pages of ad to ask for their execution. Except for one problem, they did not commit the act. But society simply say, we're just fine with that. The 4 black men who lost their life in Florida in the hands of a white mob, society just shrugged it off. They deserve it. Except for one problem, they were not the perpetrators. But time and again and again and again, society says it's fine by us. That's why you see in the news, every time you hear of a police officer killing an unarmed black man, it becomes almost like a natural thing. And the police officer just gets back on his job as if nothing had happened. Which war on black, you ask? Just recently, yesterday, a police officer who killed close range 5 times a mentally ill black woman in Texas is back on his job. It's not something that happened too long ago, a couple of weeks or at the very most a month ago. A mentally ill black woman killed at close range 5 times. That officer is back on the job. Which war on blacks, you ask? In California just a month ago, police officer shoot blacks and they just pretend to do something that's called justice and just shrug it off. Our society has been condoning the war on blacks perpetrated by the individual that I call criminals with badges, which are most police officers. They are the ones who are responsible to wage the war on blacks. They're criminal with badges. There is no other way of labeling those people. So yes, there is a war on blacks, and the reason that a lot of the people who are pushing back is because 1, they may not be victim, and 2, they do not understand that war means casualty, and in the black community there have been casualties, mounting casualties of that war. Both the government and civilians have been taking advantage of it. The reason I show you those examples is to show you that even civilians understand that pinning something on blacks works. Because our society quickly work to make certain that whoever that crime, if that person is a black, is pinned on, they would look for that individual, they would punish that individual. Yes, there is indeed a war on blacks, and it is being waged by criminals with badges. We will show you that this is not something that started yesterday. It's not something that just so happened that in this 21st century, all of a sudden people have become racist and they start waging a war. I'm going to show you as far back as that has started. And then we'll take a look at what we are dealing with today and what ought to be done, must be done in order to put an end to that, because the war on blacks that our society is waging is not one-sided. They're waging the war on multiple fronts, and I'm going to show you the strategy that is being used to wage that war on blacks. And because there are casualties, we cannot simply ignore it. When we hear that the US government is selling weapons to countries that are bombing civilians, currently there is such a discussion in Washington that the Donald Trump administration is bypassing Congress to sell weapons to the Saudis who are bombing civilians in Yemen. We are up in arms because that's not acceptable, except for one problem. Right here at home, there is a war being waged on black, and we just turn a blind eye because, well, it's blacks. It doesn't matter.
Hi, I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program. War on blacks is a topic added to the Fourth Branch programming in order to discuss the intricacies, the complexities of race relation in America. The goal is threefold. 1. To bring attention to the various forms of prejudice, discrimination, and racism in the country. 2. To expose the undeniable presence of such in every aspect of life and every corner of our society. 3. To extricate us all from the ignorance, the indifference, or the complicity. The ultimate objective is to make the discussions of those issues, racism, prejudice, discrimination, a normal part of our lives. Then, and only then, will we as a society be able to eradicate the problem. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Abraham Joshua Heschel exclaimed, "Racism is man's gravest threat to man, the maximum of hatred for the minimum of reason." Join me in the journey to restore equality. Or would you please get out of the way? Thank you.
There is indeed a war on blacks. The example I gave you earlier about those at different time in history in which blacks were accused of crime that they never committed and yet still paid price, hefty price. In fact, 4 of them end up paying with their lives. But it is not a behavior in our society to do those kind of things to blacks. It started way before slavery ended. In 1741, in New York City, there was a robbery, and there were several arsons that were done across the city. For those of you who watch me talking about the period of slavery, you may recall that that was a strategy that the slave had to fight against slavery, because in their mind, if they burned down the plantation, the place that they were forced to work on, then that would help to put an end to slavery. All 1741, all black men, both those who were slaves then and those who were free, because you may recall that New York was one of the states which pretty much were lenient in terms of slavery, because the state did not overwhelmingly rely on slave for its economy, and because of that, slavery wasn't really that much of a practice as it was in the South. But nevertheless, the practice was still there, but not as much as the South. So in 1741, after those arson, black men, both free and slave, were rounded up. There was a semblance of trial, and all of them were condemned to death, executed publicly. History reports us the accusers, the police officers, even the judges were in on it, knowing full well that did not happen. As you can see, the idea of blaming blacks did not start yesterday. It is mind-boggling sometimes to understand that the people who actually committing the crimes, in that case, in that time, the whites, they were the ones who were subjecting blacks to slavery. They were the ones who were torturing blacks. They were the ones who were abusing blacks. But when the slave tried to fight that back, automatically they became the perpetrators. Isn't that ironic? And it is a practice that has not stopped today. What I just mentioned to you happened in 1741. Slavery was full-fledged in the country. White people accusing, police officer accusing, the judges going along, and they executed a group of blacks for doing absolutely nothing. So as you can see, the example I just gave you that happened in the 20th century is not something that just started to happen. ingrained in the white community to systematically, continuously, consciously blame the victim for crimes. They subjected blacks to slavery, to torture, to long hours of being on the field, whether scorching sun or shivering cold. But when those blacks were subjected to those conditions, try to escape those conditions, what say no? They are criminals. So police officers, civilian, the justice system, the judges, all three aspects of our society are in on blaming the victims. Now you could say, well, that was slavery time. What the hell? Those kind of things don't happen anymore in this country. Your memory may be short, but let me give you a refresher. Every time a police officer shoot down, gun down, execute an unarmed black individual, what is his defense? I was afraid for my life. It's blaming the victim. I was afraid for my life, so I was in my right to kill. And what does the justice system do? Hey, you were right, you were afraid for your life, so you just killed a black man. So no, it was, yes, slavery time, but the practice continues today. Every time a police officer gun down, execute publicly a black individual, the defense is, I was afraid for my life. And that's all the police officer has to say. And the justice system look at it and say, you're right, you were afraid, so you kill a black person, so what? So that, remember I just showed you in 1741, you have the civilians making up stories about blacks. You have the police officers corroborating the stories, and you have the judges. So you have the civilian, you have the law enforcement officers, the criminal, those I label criminal with badges, and you have the judges, the justice system. All three aspects of our society gather together to wage a war on blacks. They all three say, yes, it did happen, when they know full well no such thing happened. Today, a police officer gunned down, executed black individual. He was afraid for his life. That's a police officer, law enforcement. And the justice, what does the justice say? You're right, you were afraid for his life. But let me show you what the civilians are saying. Because nothing has changed from slavery time to today. Absolutely nothing has changed. Society continues to practice the blaming the victim. What I'm about to show you is actually graphic, and it's heart-wrenching, but it's necessary to show you that our society has continued to condone the crime perpetrated by police officers, because if there is no price to pay, why wouldn't they continue to do what they do? Because there is no price to pay. All the justice system do is some sort of semblance of justice. Now, for blacks, the proper terminology is the injustice system. Now take a look at this, because it's mind-boggling sometimes for me to even process this information. Let me show you the video first, and then we'll talk about what that is. I'll show that to you again. The gentleman that just got executed by that police officer, his name is Walter Scott. Running away from him, he pulled his gun and shot him 7 times. Did you know that at trial we had a hung jury? The police officers, criminal with badges, the justice system, on it, and now we have the civilian. How do you have 12 members of a jury looking at that and come up with hung jury? Nothing has changed. So the example I gave you was 1741, was during slavery. You could have said it was just slavery time. What I just showed you happened in 2015. And we had a hung jury. Our society are in on the war on blacks, use police officer to do that job, and the justice department, the justice system, to simply clean it up. And you're asking me which war on blacks? Really? Here's the video of Eric Garner being choked to death by Daniel Pantaleo. And there were 3 other police officers coming to try to handcuff the guy. The guy was unarmed. A police officer choking him, and he's saying, I cannot breathe, I cannot breathe, I cannot breathe. Continue to choke him until he choked him to death.
Put your hand behind your back,
That was how 43-year-old New Yorker Eric Garner.
Those are the people who we say whose job is to serve and to protect. But when it comes to blacks, their job is to kill, and the justice system to clean up. Daniel Pantaleo is on the street just, no big deal. In fact, his commanding officer, his supervisor, who is a lieutenant, when that knows that Daniel Pantaleo choked an individual to death, he sent a text saying, no big deal. And what I'm telling you is written, is documented. He sent a text out that the supervisor, no big deal. And you're asking me, you have the audacity to ask the question, which war on blacks? Did you mean to ask that question? Or you didn't have anything else to add to the conversation? Throughout the history of the United States, blacks have been tortured during slavery, executed with impunity that was by the masters during slavery. And beyond slavery, police officers have the license to kill blacks with no fear of any punishment. It's not sufficient to say we're going to hold police officer accountable, because we heard that over and over and over. In fact, me personally, I'm tired of hearing that. Because the way that you prevent someone from doing something bad is to make certain that there is a punishment which accompanies that something bad. If there is an excuse for it, we're always going to have police officers continuously targeting and killing blacks and getting away with it, because why wouldn't they? There is no punishment because there is always an excuse. I was afraid for my life. That's all you need to say. London City, which is a city very similar to New York City in demographics, in 2017 had only one civilian who was killed by a law enforcement officer. One for the whole year of 2017. In the United States, we had 1,600. Blacks represent a very small percentage of the population. I believe either 13 or so percent. But get almost 38% of the time for victim of police officer. And it is not just about being killed on the street. They have their civil rights violated. They get harsher punishment for crimes similar to their white counterpart. The list is endless. If what those criminals with badges are doing to black happen at a more frequent pace, it would have been nothing other than genocide. Which war on blacks, you asking? Now the question you should ask, how do we put an end to that? Because there is no debate about it. It is acknowledged that's what's been going on across the country. So there is no argument there. Asking which war on black is to simply deny what is currently going on in the black community. And the war, as I mentioned before, during the time I was debating the slavery time, and we will continue that conversation to show you that the war has, the blacks have suffered mounting casualty. Those are physical casualty, emotional casualty, financial casualty, no end in sight. After that officer, Daniel Pantaleo, choked Eric Garner to death, his supervisor said, no big deal. And not trying to explain what he was trying to say. How do you explain you just choke a civilian to death and the message you sitting in the comfort of your office? At least you could have something better to say. No big deal. Of course it's no big deal. It's a black. In South Carolina, 12 jurors who had the time to listen to stories about a police officer who shot a fleeing black man several times, 7 times in the back. And the verdict, hung jury. How do you come up with that verdict after watching a video like this? There is indeed a war on blacks across the country. It's not confined to an area, to a region, to a state. It is across the nation that there is indeed a war on blacks, and it is in several different fronts. It is at the job place. It is applying for a job. It is on the street. It is in the justice system. It is at the hospital. It is everywhere that you turn, no matter which aspect of life you take and you insert in that aspect of life a black individual in the equation, automatically watch out for the war. And the war is being waged not just by the police officer on the street. They just, agent whose job is to do what they are tasked to do. That's what they are tasked to do, to wage the war on blacks. They are the front men. And the justice system just clean it up. And it doesn't happen just at the state level, it happens at the federal level. In Washington, we have legislation that are being passed, judges that are being put on the bench, whose views are exactly that, to make sure that they put away as many blacks as possible. In the 1980s, 1990s, in New York City, a number of young teenage blacks rounded up, put in jail under the premise of war on drugs. Yes, a lot of young blacks have their lives destroyed by the justice system because they found them with a small pack of drugs that they're gonna smoke. And they labeled criminals. And they put in jail, and their lives completely destroyed. They never get to finish school, and when they come out, they know nothing about our society. So they don't have anything to contribute. The justice system, our system, the war on black, did that to them. Thousands and thousands and thousands of young black men. Today, what do you see happen? There is a movement to legalize drug, if it were to be that bad, why is it now a nationwide movement to legalize it? The same reason that was used to put all those young black men in jail and label them criminal. That's the exact same reason. They weren't drug dealers, they were just smoking pot. And as it is reported, a comparable number of white individuals were doing the same thing, except that they weren't caught in the red because they were after blacks. Yes, thousands and thousands and thousands of young black men have their lives destroyed by the justice system and labeled criminals because they were found with a small pack of drugs. And who were responsible to do the job? Those criminals with badges. They're the front men for the justice system. So they took all those thousands and thousands of young black men, throw them in jail, labeled them criminals, never told them that, never have a day, some of them never had a day in court. They spent years in jail, never seen a judge. Their civil rights violated. And even if they're lucky enough to live long enough to walk out of jail, they walk out nothing to contribute to society. They've been in jail for so long for stupidity, which is the same movement that's currently being made to say, let's not criminalize the use of drugs. Yes, after destroying the lives of hundreds of thousands of young black men, now society say, what the hell? We've done that. We've destroyed enough lives. Let's just move on. Yes, there has been a war on blacks. And it cost a lot to blacks. And those are not any better than a police officer executing an unarmed black man, because someone whose life has been destroyed by arresting that person, throwing that person in jail, label that person criminal, never had a chance to come in front of a judge, which I'm not sure it would have made a big difference, because most of the judges already have a mindset to make certain that blacks stayed in jail. That's a justice system for you. In other words, society has been waging a war on blacks. There is no argument, no if and but about it. The question that remains, not to ask the question which war on blacks, but rather how to put an end to the war on blacks. So whenever I have one of those individuals coming and asking that question, I said either that person is completely ignorant, is a racist, stupid, an idiot, or simply don't care what happened to blacks. That's why I say in the announcement, you have only two choices. It's either your contribution is to help fix that problem, or get out of the way so that those who want to fix the problem can have the space to fix the problem. There is a war on blacks, and it's very costly. When a police officer executes a black man, the casualty doesn't stop there. Yes, a human life is taken away. There is the emotional casualty, because that individual who has family, children, a wife left behind. Now there is the emotional casualties. And of course, there is the financial casualty, because now, no matter what little that individual contributed to helping his family, now he no longer can do that because his life has been taken away by a criminal with badges. And you can rest assured, one thing is certain: every time a criminal with a badge execute an unarmed black man, the story that you will hear will always be fabricated, will always be false. Because there is this inclination to blame the victim. When Michael Brown was gunned down, executed, remember Ferguson? What did the police officer say? He was reaching for my gun. There was a similar incident that happened in California. That woman activist, her name failed me, but I will bring that back to this conversation. When she was arrested, she was charged of someone that was trying to reach the officer's gun. The charges were dropped later because that was a made-up charge. I guarantee you, every time a police officer did something to a black individual, they will always lie and fabricate story in order to win the argument. Always. You can take that to the bank. The police officer that I showed you that killed that black man from the back 7 times, before the video surfaced, you should have heard the story. In fact, he had a partner who was trying to plant a gun on the individual after the murder, the execution. The police officer was screaming, "Put your hands behind your back," after shooting someone 7 times, dropped dead, and he's trying to handcuff a dead person. Just because he's trying to make up the story as he went along so that people in the neighborhood can hear him say, "Put your hands behind your back," so that later on he can say, "Yes, I thought he was still moving." Any police officer, which I label criminal with a badge, whenever they execute a black man, they always fabricate the story behind the execution. You can take that to the bank. There is not ever going to be a story that is true. When the police officer, in the case of Laquan McDonald in Chicago, executed the guy at point-blank range, before the video surfaced, he said that the guy was coming towards him, threatening him. When you saw the video, the guy was moving away from him. Police officers always fabricated story in order to make their story look or sound more palatable. They fabricate the story. If a video surfaces, then all of a sudden, then they have to change the story. But time and again and again and again, the story that they tell is always false. In the case of Michael Schlegel in South Carolina, before the video surfaced, that was a different story. In other words, even the idea that we always claim that body camera will help, the question is, does it? Because we saw clearly the officer shot a fleeing man 7 times, and you have a hung jury. So what good is body camera? When you already have a society, you already have a justice system, you already have criminals with badges, all of them collaborated to clean up their messes. What good is a body camera? Because those things were caught on tape. And yet you still have a hung jury. You see, unless our society does take the first step, which is to acknowledge that the problem exists. There is indeed a war on black. Casualties are mounting on a daily basis. There is no argument there. So let's go to the next step, which is what to do about it. Because we have the judges who are either racist, biased, and already have their mindset whenever there is a black defendant in front of them. That's one. We have legislation that are being passed by those individuals in Washington. Those people that are putting on the bench judges who are already either racist, bigots, and who are enforcing guidelines and rules that are overwhelmingly detrimental to blacks. So there is a system in place that causing that problem. And we have the front people, the front men, the police officer, the criminal with badges, who are perpetrating the crimes on the street and getting away with it. So we have several different problems to work with. It's not a one problem. It's on so many different fronts that we have a problem. There is indeed a war on blacks. Now in our society, it is manifested in the form of racism, in the form of prejudice, in the form of bias. You see, racism is the action, the behavior, the action, and the thought towards another individual based only on his race, based only on her race, irrespective of the facts. So someone who is racist knows nothing about the individual. He or she behaves that way. The only thing that's visible to that individual is the skin color. So it is the behavior, the action, and the thought towards another individual based exclusively on external factors. However, institutionalized racism is a system which nurtures, which condones, or even promotes racist behavior, action, and languages. So when you hear someone say, "I'm not racist," you don't have to say you're not racist. Your action will help. Your language will help. So you don't have. Watch those people in Washington, the Mitch McConnell, placing on the court, on the federal bench, judges who are openly racist. Judges who have clearly said where they stand. And yet, they have no qualm putting those people on the court. Tell me who you're with, and I'll tell you who you are. You cannot tell me you're not racist when you're encouraging racism. That just doesn't jive. You can scream at the top of your lungs that you're not racist, but if you're encouraging racism, you are a racist. No matter what you say, you are a racist. In order to stop, John Roberts said that, in order to stop racist behavior is to stop racist behavior. It's that simple. It's not that difficult. So if you hear someone say, "I'm not racist," but encouraging racism, It's pure baloney. The person is a racist. And it is this type of behavior that obviously converts into legislation, into laws which are racist, which overwhelmingly detrimental to blacks, to minority. There is no if and but about this problem. They are real and they're happening on a regular basis. And because of that, we also make it a point to bring to this program, if it's not on a daily basis, but at least on a regular basis, every other day. But we'll work out the logistics. But we will bring this program on a regular basis to keep this conversation on the forefront, so that it is pretty obvious that we do have a problem in this nation, that there is indeed a war on black, and the people who are tasked to wage that war are the same individual we call police officers, who are no other than criminals with badges and who are out there killing people they are supposed to protect. In 2017, in London, England, just one civilian lost his life to law enforcement. In the United States, in 2017, 1,600 individuals lost their life to police officers. Where is the to serve and to protect comes into the picture? We condone police officer killing. We explain it away. We accept it. We rationalize it. Yesterday, news came out, a police officer who shot at point blank range a mentally ill black woman 5 times, is back on the job. Which war on blacks, you ask?
Hi, I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program. War on Blacks is a topic added to the Fourth Branch programming in order to discuss the intricacies, the complexities of race relation in America. The goal is threefold. 1. To bring attention to the various forms of prejudice, discrimination, and racism in the country. 2. To expose the undeniable presence of such in every aspect of life and every corner of our society. 3. To extricate us all from the ignorance, the indifference, or the complicity. The ultimate objective is to make the discussions of those issues, racism, prejudice, discrimination, a normal part of our lives. Then and only then will we as a society be able to eradicate the problem. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Abraham Joshua Heschel exclaimed, "Racism is man's gravest threat to man, the maximum of hatred for the minimum of reason." Join me in the journey to restore equality. Or would you please get out of the way? Thank you.
If you have a better way to address this topic, this problem, we'd like to hear from you. Should you have questions, suggestions, comments, criticism, do not hesitate to contact us. If you have a particular topic of interest you would like to hear us talk about, send it to us. We will research it. We will talk about it, debate it right here on the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense. In the meantime, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. See you next week.
That was an update through the prism of common sense. Join us again next week. I am MD, host of the Fourth Branch program, the place for common sense. Send us comments, criticism, suggestion, or simply let us know how we're doing. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful weekend. See you soon. The Fourth Branch podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the People Branch publication, which can be found on the People Branch website, located at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org website, in which you will find a number of very interesting articles. My name is Mike Duchesne, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be. Hopefully you can join me again next time for another interesting episode of this podcast. That was the Fourth Branch, live from New York. Good day.
What if hip-hop never existed? Do you think there'd be as many heads screaming out, stop snitching? What if Adam and Eve ain't eat the fruit? You think we'd be able to see the truth? Or what if Albert Einstein ain't think of the nuke? Or Smith & Wesson ain't teach us to shoot? You think there'd be as many players out there if there was no booth? Matter of fact, what if white man hung off a noose? Would it still be cool to say nigga? Or maybe we would make six figures? Or would we wanna be crackers? And all the whites would be rappers. What if Martin Luther King survived? You think the New Orleans flood would have caused them to drop and die? I wonder what if and see what is. Stand back from the picture and ask yourself why. What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched to rights and wrongs? You think you'd change your route to the road we on? What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched to rights and wrongs? You think you'd change your route to the road we on? If Christopher Wallace never got murked, how much money would Sean Carter be worth? What if Tupac never got hit with the flame? Would the game still have changed, filled with these lames? What if Jabari wasn't speeding down the street? What if the bullet Malcolm sent never hit Zeke? A black guy dropped off at the house instead of the stop? Or Ali never got bopped by the cops? What if the little homie Easy didn't die? Stand back from the picture and ask yourself why. What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched to rights and wrongs? You think you'd change your route to the road we on? What if life wasn't all you thought? What if everything you knew was gone? What if we switched to rights and wrongs? You think you'd change your route to the road